be here, and yes, my wife and I just flew in from Phoenix, Arizona after a 9.5-hour flight, but I got a little sleep, and I'm always inspired when the minute I touch the piano. So let me share with you that the program is going to be about 1 hour and 15 minutes. So we're here at about 9:20 or so, 9:30, and I'm going to play a lot of music for you. I take a few minutes to explain the music. I think you can enjoy the music more if you know a little bit more about that, and then I'm going to share, after hearing a lot of music, about myself and my story. So you have a program, so I'm going to follow your program. So first I'm going to start off with 3 pieces by a composer named Scarlatti. Now Scarlatti is not as famous as other composers, but you've heard of Bach, great composer and believer in Jesus Christ, and you've heard of Handel, who wrote the Messiah right here in London, premiered. Bach and Handel and Scarlatti were all born in the same year. Not many people know that. 1685. 3 of the greatest composers were born within a few months of each other. 1685 was a good year for music, see? Scarlatti didn't have a nice grand piano. He had a little harpsichord, a clavichord, where the instrument is plucked, almost like a guitar, the strings. So the first piece is a very delicate piece. The second piece is called the pastoral. And when I play these fast notes, trills, like that, there are these birds in the trees. There are 25 birds in this piece. The third piece is called the hunt, and it starts off with a horn call. And you can see the king getting on his horse and running out and going with his horse looking for the hunt, for the fox. So 3 pieces. The first delicate piece, the birds, the pastoral, the trills, and the hunt by the Italian composer Domenico Scarlatti. I can tell you that Scarlatti wrote 550 pieces like that. 550. And about every 6 months I learned 3 new ones. So if I came here and played 3 different ones, I could come for 183 more years. But every one of them is a universe of genius. It's just amazing little pieces. Next, I'm going to play you 2 pieces on your program by Schubert. Schubert lived 200 years ago, Scarlatti 300 years ago. Schubert lived during the time of Beethoven. The first piece is very delicate again, little march, very perfect little piece. Sometimes the simplest pieces are the hardest pieces because they're so perfect. The second piece is called an impromptu. It's very dramatic. Now Schubert was very famous at writing beautiful songs. He wrote over 600 songs. He only lived to be 31 years of age. And in the middle of the second piece, the piece comes to a stop, and you hear this very beautiful, slow, beautiful melody by Schubert. So this is the delicate first march, then the dramatic impromptu by the Austrian composer Franz Schubert. Well, next I'm going to play you a piece by Beethoven, my favorite composer. Beethoven wrote a number of pieces called sonatas, and a sonata is anywhere from 10 minutes long to 50 minutes long. He wrote 32 sonatas. If I played all 32 sonatas, you'd have to sit here for 17 hours. So it's a lot of music, 735 pages of piano music. Look what it did to me, see? But I'm going to play you a very famous sonata. It's called the Pathétique. So I told you there's 32, and this is number 8. In your program, does it say number 8? Does it say that, number 8? Okay, so you know that this is a little bit on the earlier side. The title, pathos, comes from the Greek word which means suffering. So the reason the title of the piece has that is because it's very intense. Very intense. Nobody had ever written anything this dramatic and intense. Mozart, Haydn, they never conceived of music this much of grabbing your throat and drama. The piece starts off very slow and intense, then it gets fast and intense, and Beethoven really just doesn't let up. The second movement is a very beautiful melody. It's very famous. Some of you may recognize it, but it's been used for a lot of different other idioms. The third movement is called a rondo, and a rondo is a round, like row, row, row your boat. You're going to hear this melody come back 4 or 5 times, but it's also pretty dramatic. Now, it was during this piece that Beethoven began to lose his hearing, and eventually he couldn't hear anymore. But even though he lost a lot of his hearing, which happened pretty dramatically at this point, he could still hear it in his head, although he couldn't hear it with his ears. So it's pretty remarkable that he could still know the drama of the piece and the sense of the piece. And again, as I mentioned, when he played this, actually when he wrote this piece, he didn't play it because of the loss of his hearing, but when this was played, music changed forever. Nobody had ever written anything this dramatic. So the 3 movements takes about maybe 14 minutes, 15 minutes or so. This is going to be the longest piece of the night. The 3 movements, the very dramatic first movement, the beautiful second movement, the rondo third movement of the Pathétique Sonata by the German composer Beethoven.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much. Next, I'm going to play you two pieces by Chopin that are on your program. Chopin is very unique because he is the only composer who wrote just for the piano. So you have all these other composers, Scarlatti and Mozart, Beethoven, Tchaikovsky, they all wrote for violin or orchestra or piano or voice. But Chopin, 98% of his music was written for one instrument, the piano. Poland was going through a struggle for their independence from Prussia, not Russia, but Prussia. They lost a battle, and he wrote this piece called the Tragic Polonaise. It's very sad. You'll hear this booming melody in the left hand. It's very labored, very, pessimistic, you could almost say, tragic. And then a few days later, he wrote the next piece called the Military Polonaise. This is a very famous piece, very energetic, very almost bombastic. This is to rally up the Polish people. At one point, you can hear a drum roll to encourage the Polish people, and eventually, of course, they got their independence. I've been to Poland a few times, played a number of tours there, and played these pieces, and this is very moving to them, because this is their history. These pieces are part of their history. A Polonaise is a national dance of Poland, has specific rhythms that are only unique to Polish folk music. So these is the Tragic and the Military Polonaise. They were written within the same time, published at the same time by the Polish composer Chopin. Thank you very much. Well, next on your program, I'm going to play you 3 pieces by the French composer Debussy. And whenever Debussy wrote music, there was always a story to it. So if you give me a few minutes, I can talk about the pieces. It'll really come to life. This is one of the few pieces that Debussy titled in Spanish and not in French. I know you have the English translations, but the Spanish title is called La Puerta del Vino, which means the doorway of wine, or the gateway of wine. If you've ever been to southern Spain, there's a city called Granada. And in the city of Granada, there's a very famous palace called the Alhambra. The Alhambra Palace has this entranceway called the doorway of wine, La Puerta del Vino. I've been there. There's a big plaque that says the people of Spain honors the great French composer who wrote a piece about this place. So you're going to hear this very Spanish rhythm, a man playing a guitar, singing, very Spanish flavor. Now it's amazing how the piece was written. Debussy had a friend who went on vacation in southern Spain because it was dry and sunny. And he wrote him a postcard, 1911. I have a copy, not of the original postcard, but a same copy of the postcard that was sent in 1911. And the postcard said, "Dear Claude, Debussy, wish you were here, beautiful weather, blah, blah," it's in French. And when you look at it, it's a 1911 black and white postcard of this doorway. Now this doorway, you could drive a bus through it. It's an entranceway. It's not like a doorway of this. Debussy gets so inspired from this postcard that he wrote this piece. Now, you know, I get postcards of the Grand Canyon. And I put them on my refrigerator and it doesn't do anything to me. Debussy gets a postcard of a door, so it's amazing. The second piece is Ondine. That's a French word that's used in mythology. French are water sprites, water nymphs. In deep pools of water, there are these fairies, and they play all day, and they build sandcastles, and they agitate the water, so you'll hear a lot of water sounds. At the end of the piece, you're going to hear what's called a jet d'eau. A jet d'eau is a fountain of water, and if you close your eyes, you'll feel the water spraying on your face. If you don't feel the water spraying on your face, you'll feel my sweat spraying on your face.
I've got it.
He has the sweat. It's on the lens. The third piece is called The Sunken Cathedral, very famous piece. La Cathédrale Engloutie. It's very foggy. You're on the coast of France, very foggy, and after about 30 seconds, you're going to hear 3 soft bells. The water starts moving, the bells get louder, the water moves, the bells get louder, and then out of the water comes this gigantic, Gothic European cathedral. Now, you know, it gets pretty intense. You know, it took them, as you know, 300 years to build a cathedral. And it gets pretty intense, and you say, ooh, 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 it's coming up. No, it gets more intense. You say, ooh, 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 now it's coming up. No, it gets more intense. When the piano starts rising off the platform, you'll know. But you'll know when this cathedral comes out of the water. The water starts moving again, and then the whole cathedral slowly sinks down into the water. That's why in French it's called La Cathédrale Engloutie, the sunken, engulfed cathedral. The fog returns, you hear 2 soft bells, and the piece ends. So this is 3 pieces. Travel with me. Spain, La Puerta del Vino, the doorway of wine. Interesting, let me say one other thing. About a few months ago, I found out something very unique about this doorway to this palace. I thought this was a place where people served wine and they could come and drink. What I found out was that when the harvest was in the area of Granada, once a year they had a parade thanking God for their harvest, and that was one time a year they opened up the doorway to the palace to bring in the harvest and as a celebration to God. So that's very unique. They opened the door. The Puerta del Vino was the parade of gratitude to God for the harvest. So the second piece, the Ondine, the water sprites, and the third piece, the Sunken Cathedral by the French composer Claude Debussy.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much. Well, before I play one last piece in your program by Bartok, I want to take a couple of minutes and share about myself. My story really begins with my parents. My father was born in Romania, in Eastern Europe, in 1905. My mother was born, at that time the country was called Czechoslovakia. Today it's called Slovakia. But she was born in Czechoslovakia in 1915. Both of my parents left Europe because of the Second World War. In fact, my father's family that stayed in Romania, which were his parents, my grandparents, sister, cousins, aunts and uncles, all died in the Holocaust. There were 14,000 Jews in this city in eastern Romania, and the Nazis came in one day they gathered all of them and killed 10,000 Jews in one day, buried them in a mass grave. That's where my grandparents are buried. I've been to the city, I've seen the grave and the markers. And the other 4,000 were taken to a concentration camp, and none of them survived. So if my parents stayed in Europe, they never would have lived, never. But they escaped Europe, and they eventually came to the United States in 1950, and I was born 5 months later in October of 1950. And I was raised in a very religious Jewish home. My parents were very religious Jews. They sent me to public school during the day, and then after that, I went to school in the synagogue, and it was called Hebrew school. And in Hebrew school, I learned Hebrew. I learned all about being Jewish. I learned hundreds of prayers, and I went to Hebrew school 5 days a week for 8 years. So this was a very, very big part of my life. This was not a 2-week course. It was a very big part of my everyday life. All my friends were Jewish, all my relatives were Jewish, and when I was 14, I became the most religious member of my family. I became more religious than even my mother and father. I started Hebrew school when I was 8 until I was 16, so growing up, my Hebrew heritage had a big impact on me. I remember I'd wake up in the morning and pray for about a half an hour in Hebrew, putting on what's called the tefillin, the phylacteries. And then I went to school, and I had a very foul mouth. I could swear a lot, I could curse, I could lie to my parents and lie to my teachers. And I remember saying to myself how easy it was to be religious. I mean, I'd go to the synagogue and I'd pray and I'd look up, look down, and I said, you know, this isn't hard. And then an hour later, I'm swearing and lying and cursing, and I said to myself, this isn't hard. It was easy to be religious, and it was easy not to be religious. Then when I was 17, I went to music school in New York City, a school called the Juilliard School of Music. I was there for 5 years, and I got a bachelor's and a master's in piano. And there I met 3 students who were born-again Christians. And they heard I was a religious Jew, and they began to talk to me. They basically asked me 2 questions. They asked me if I ever read the New Testament. And I told them, no, I never read a word of the New Testament. I was told the New Testament was not a Jewish book. It wasn't for the Jews. You'd never find a New Testament in our home. So I had no idea what was in it. Never saw one, never read one. They asked me if I thought if Jesus was the Messiah. The Jews are waiting for this messenger. In Hebrew it's called Mashiach. And I said, no, I didn't think that Jesus was the salvation for Jewish people. But I was a very, very moral person. You know, I didn't want to do anything to hurt my parents. They sacrificed for me. They almost died for me. So I never drank. To this day, I don't know what a beer tastes like. Was never drunk. Never took drugs. I lived in New York City from 1968 to 1973. That was the height of the Vietnam War. That was the height of the hippie movement. Let me tell you something. There were lots of drugs. LSD, marijuana, in the school, in the apartment building. I never took any of it. Nothing. Never had premarital sex. So even though I was very moral on the outside, no sex, no drugs, no drinking, let me tell you, I was very, very, very immoral on the inside. I knew who I was, and I was not on the inside what I appeared like on the outside. I could do many Jewish things, but it never affected me on the inside. I was very moral, I was very religious, but I was not changed. So I decided if I wanted to know about this person, Jesus Christ, I decided I was going to read the New Testament. And that was a big step for me as a Jewish person,
to read this book. And I didn't want to talk to a rabbi or a priest or a minister. If I want to know about this person, I'm going to read about it myself. Now, let me tell you, when I was a student at Juilliard, I used to practice for 10 hours a day. Now, let me tell you, first of all, that's not a lie or an exaggeration. I didn't sit at the piano for 9 hours and 45 minutes. I literally sat every day at the piano for 10 full hours. I didn't leave the school until I sat and practiced 10 full hours. And when I started to read the New Testament, my whole life came to a stop. I was shocked when I started to read this book. For the first time in my life, I stopped practicing. They told me to start in this book called John, the Gospel of John. So here is a man, Jesus, who said of himself, I am the light of the world. Here's a man, Jesus, who said of himself, I am the bread of life. Here's a man, Jesus, who said of himself, no man comes to God, the Father, except through me. He who has the Son of God has life. He who does not have the Son of God does not have life. Now let me tell you something, pardon my expression. The first time I read those words, I thought Jesus was an idiot. Do you know that no man in human history ever said words like that? No man in human history. When Moses got the 10 Commandments, he didn't say, I'm the light of the world. Abraham never said, I'm the light of the world. So I had to make a decision. Either Jesus is a liar, or a lunatic, or an egomaniac, or like a lot of Jews, they made up this person. This man lived or died, who knows? But they invented all these miracles. They invented a Messiah. And I was going to throw away the New Testament. I'm going to go practice. And then I said to myself, Sam, if Jesus is who he says he is, Sam, I am the light of this world. You know something? I may be making the biggest mistake of my life. I better listen to what this man has to say. And the second thing that shocked me was how many times Jesus talked about coming for sinners. Well, let me tell you something. I was not a sinner. I was very moral. I was very religious. But Jesus said he came to bring forgiveness. And you know what else he said? He said he came to change us on the inside. Take out a heart of stone and put in a heart of flesh, of life. Well, you know, I've played concerts in 52 countries. And I've learned that whether you're black or white or Asian or Hispanic or communist. I was in China a few months ago. I've been to Cuba. Americans can't go to Cuba, but I got permission to go to Cuba. I've been to Russia back in the 70s. I've played for Democrats and Republicans in the United States. How do you like that? Conservative or labor, is that what you have here? Right. You know, we are all experts at hiding things. Do you know that? We have made deception into an art. You can hide things from your wife. You can hide things from your husband. You can hide things from friends at work. You can hide things from your children. Children can hide things from their parents. I mean, my friend, we're good at this. We're good at this. But nobody hides anything from God. Nobody. And for the first time in my life, I realized that God knew everything I said and everything I thought and everything I looked at with my eyes. And even though I was very moral and religious, I was the idiot to think I could hide things in my life from God. And on May 21st, 1971, 34 years ago, for the first time, I prayed to Jesus Christ. Now, I prayed to God every night. I could say lots of Jewish prayers. The first time I prayed to Jesus Christ, and I asked Jesus Christ to forgive me of my sins. And I asked Jesus Christ to change me on the inside. And I asked Jesus Christ to take over my life. And I wanted to know Jesus Christ. I wanted to live for this one, Jesus Christ. I wanted to follow what he said, what I read. And my friend, when I finished praying that prayer, I was a totally changed person. I knew that God had changed me completely on the inside. I had a dirty mouth, filthy mouth, and instantly, God cleaned it and changed it. I was shocked. I stopped cursing. I had a filthy, dirty mind. Instantly, God cleaned it. 34 years ago, I couldn't wait to wake up the next morning and read about Jesus Christ and pray to Jesus Christ and tell my friends at Juilliard, who many of them were Jewish, about Jesus Christ. I've played over 1,600 concerts. It's a lot of sweat, huh? And you can take all my concerts and applause and write-ups and television and my friend, all of that is nothing. Nothing. Do you know how much nothing is? Nothing compared to having Jesus Christ. The greatest thing I ever did in my life, the most important thing I ever did in my life, was to give my life to Jesus Christ, my Messiah, Yeshua HaMashiach. Music is not the most important thing in my life. Jesus Christ is the most important thing in my life, because this is my friend. Jesus Christ is the only person that will ever, ever, ever change your heart. This church cannot change your heart. You can go to a Bible church, you can go to the Anglican church, the Methodist church, the Lutheran church, the Catholic church. You could pray 20 times a day to Muhammad. You could burn 1,000,000 tons of incense to Buddha. Now, I know religious Buddhists, and I know religious Catholics, and I'm sure you know religious Anglicans, and there's religious Baptists. But you'll never get changed. Only Jesus said, I have the water of eternal life. Nobody else has it. Not a label, not a church, not a name, nobody. You know, I was Jewish because I was born Jewish. Just think of it. You know why someone's Muslim? They were born Muslim. People are born Catholic. They're born Protestant. Life is not in a religion. A religion will never change you. Life is in a person. In a person. And that person, my friend, is only Jesus Christ, God's Son, Messiah. And I play the piano for Jesus Christ. He gave me the ears to hear the music, and the fingers to play the music, and the mind to learn the music. You know that Jesus has never missed one of my concerts. You know that? 2 people have never missed my concerts, Jesus and me. Now my wife's here. She's heard me play maybe almost 900 times or so, but not every time. And every time I give a concert in a church, or with an orchestra, or at a concert hall, or at a college or university, there was always one person in the front row in the middle. I'm surprised anybody didn't sit in the front. One person in the front row in the middle, and that's Jesus Christ. I mean that. And when I sit down to play, Jesus always says the same thing to me. He says, Sam, I'm really looking forward to hearing you play for me tonight. My friend, it is worth living for Jesus Christ. It's worth it. It's worth serving Jesus Christ. It's an honor to follow him. It's an honor to serve him. Well, one last piece on your program, then we'll be done. This is a piece by a composer named Bartók. So you've heard French music, now you're hearing Hungarian music, you've heard Chopin, you've heard Beethoven, you've heard everything. You had a whole meal. Bartók is Hungarian, and this piece is called 6 Romanian Folk Dances. These are actual dances from Romania, and one's a peasant dance, a national dance, a wedding dance, and he's imitating a balalaika, a string instrument where you pluck the instrument. So this is the last piece, very short, 6 Romanian folk dances by the Hungarian composer Bela Bartók.
fantastic, Sam.
Just briefly, does anybody, sometimes in a smaller group like this, anybody have a question you'd like to ask me about my life or music or social security number? Yes, ma'am.
How did your parents react to your music?
Yes, I get asked that all the time. How did my parents respond? I went and shared with my parents, and it was very difficult for them, especially my father. Now, you have to understand, my father's father died because he was Jewish from the Second World War, and now his son believes in Jesus Christ. So my father actually told me to leave the house. He said I was no longer his son. He never wanted to hear from me, and as far as he was concerned, I was dead. I didn't hear from my parents for a number of years. My wife and I got married. They didn't attend. Over the time, we began to communicate. Our son, our firstborn, our son was born on my father's birthday. That began to open up doors. But it was very difficult, very superficial. 10 years ago, my father became ill, and I wanted to visit him in the hospital, and he refused to see me. He died 4 days later, and I did not go to his funeral. My mother's alive. She's 90 years old. I just saw her 4 days ago, telling her I was coming to Europe, and I'm very close to her. I've shared with her and prayed with her, but she's not a believer, and I can tell you I lost a lot of family and friends, but I can tell you after 34 years that Jesus is worth it all. I was lonely, and he was present with me. I was hurting. He was comforting to me. I needed direction. Everything I needed, Jesus Christ was more. So, yes, someone else? Any question you have? Yes, ma'am.
Where were you born in the States?
I was born in South Texas, San Antonio. My parents left Europe in 1940. In fact, my mother saw the Nazis coming over the Sudeten Mountains to Bratislava, Slovakia. And they couldn't get in the United States, so like a lot of Jews, they ended up in South America. My parents lived in Quito, Ecuador from 1940 to 1950 during the war. Then in 1950, my brother was born there, my sister was born there. Those 10 years, my mother was pregnant with me. And then in 1950, my father decided that he wanted to come to the United States. He didn't know a word of English. He was 45, my mother was 35. And somebody told him that in South Texas, there's a city called San Antonio, which is 55% Mexican. And he went to the city, he took a train, he got off the train, he heard people speaking Spanish, and he stayed there until he died when he was 89 years old. He worked all his life with the Spanish people. He spoke Spanish in work, and we spoke Yiddish and German at home. And he never learned English. He didn't, he just, he watched television. That was his English. Yeah, so I was born in South Texas, barely. Yes. Anyone else? Any questions? Well, let me mention briefly, I've made some recordings on a $90,000 Steinway concertgram. These are professional recordings. You can get that on Amazon and other things. One recording is all Beethoven. That's my specialty. I was a winner in an international Beethoven competition. It has the Pathetique, the Moonlight Sonata. In fact, the movie Amadeus, if you've ever seen that, that company that won that Academy Award produced that recording. They made the recording. I wish I found them 20 years ago. Another recording is 16 pieces by Debussy, French composer, Clair de Lune. 16 pieces, very delicate. You listen to the French recording and all the stress goes out of you. Your husband will come home and you'll be a puddle of water in the living room. And then there's a recording of Russian music, which is Rachmaninoff and Mussorgsky. And you know what happens when you listen to Russian music? All the stress goes back into you. And then there's a recording of 6 composers, Mozart, Beethoven, Schubert, Chopin, Debussy, Rachmaninoff. And then there's a DVD done by Jews for Jesus of my whole testimony. It's everything you heard tonight, but very visual. You see Hitler, the concentration camp. You see me at my bar mitzvah. You see me as a young Jewish boy. It's everything that I shared, and then there's also cassettes. Now, I must say, I wish the CDs were £5, but I can't even buy them for £5 from my distributor. The CDs are £10, the cassettes are £5. I just correct that if that's all right with you. The DVD and the CDs are £10, the cassettes are £5, but the autograph is free. In fact, once in the States, I said that the autograph was $15 and the CD was free. And a man came up to me after the concert and said, I would like a CD with no autograph. Only in America, huh? Thank you for coming. I'll be in the back there. There's refreshments. I don't know if you want to share anything more. Mine? Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it.